As many of you may know by now, Twitter has suspended my Mykeru Twitter account. Again, a little over a year since they did it the last time, in November of 2014. That I detailed in my video, Wham Bam No Thank You Ma'am. The upshot of which is that I was suspended back then because Twitter gave almost unfettered power without oversight, due process, or recourse to women action in the media, an agenda-laden, threat narrative-driven shit-for-brains advocacy group with a labia-shaped battle axe to grind. Their online forum allowed special snowflakes to fast-track unsourced and anonymous butthurt, resulting in a massive, unjustified account suspensions. Wham, acting in the safe space of tone deafness and obtuse hugbox humorlessness that is the special magisteria of vindictive cult SJWs, no doubt thought suspending the accounts of critics, satirists, and irredeemable assholes such as yours truly sent just the right message concerning the freedom of online discourse, which is that it's unreasonable to expect any unless you are sipping just the right 30-second vintage of hive mind Kool-Aid, and if you aren't, you just better keep your dirty dissenting cake hole shut. Twitter, for their part, seemed as indifferent to truth and their own narrowly defined policy, which defined abuse and harassment as unequivocal threats and online impersonation, and not, as Wham would have it, defining mockery, satire, and in a word, fun as abusive. The important thing to Twitter was to virtue signal with a Klieg light that SJW breakfast was served, and if in making that omelet a few eggs were broken, provided they were bad eggs as defined by thin-skinned authoritarian morons, then that was okay with them. What they were also okay with, and this is what totalitarians, Puritans, ideologues, and other plotters love best, is the elimination of humor, sarcasm, and satire from online discussions. Humor, the ability to create it and understand it, is not only a rough measure of intellect, but a dimension of depth. You know, it adds layers. That confuses stupid people and annoys scammers who con depends on their being taken seriously. What those conveniently outraged by it want to do is eliminate that depth and thereby reduce all online discourse to flatland where their laughably stupid claims and demands must be handled with undeserved earnestness. And once people have to act as if they take those clowns seriously, the battle is half lost. Is whittling everything down to one dimension a surefire way to eliminate thought crime? They don't know, but obviously they think it's worth a try. This time, not only has Twitter suspended my Mykeru account, but they've also suspended the Mykeru media account created during the last suspension. And as Twitter operates with all the transparency of a meter square cube of lead encased in concrete and dropped down a mineshaft straight into Satan's asshole, there's no way to know what I did to get suspended this time any more than I did last time, nor the provisions of whatever double secret probation I was on, so I can, theoretically, promise to never do it again. Whatever it was. Although, let's face it, all I did was go about my business as usual, and my business is gleefully mocking people who, for the most part, combine the dumbest quasi-intellectual fat white people privilege with the conviction that they, despite their sheltered existence and inconsequential life experiences, know what's best for everyone everywhere across all racial, religious, and gender lines until they, one way or another, just fucking snap. For all I know, it could have been a ginned-up claims of some kind of racism involved in this tweet. Mind you, that's not a Photoshop. That's a screen cap of a word search game on my Android phone, which I found both suspect and funny in a Randy Marsh Wheel of Fortune kind of way. Now, that might seem to be a stretch, but remember, when it comes to SJWs reporting online abuse, harassment, hate speech, and the color of the sky that day, it's all a stretch for them. And if they can't spin anything into something to be offended by, then they will just make that something up. And the only reason that something works is because we are well beyond the tipping point of narcissistic stupidity, wherein people think the mere fact that they were offended, or at least claim they were offended, actually means something. Being offended or being made to feel bad doesn't impose an imperative on anyone else not to do what you found offensive or what made you feel bad. Their offense isn't an expression of moral superiority. Their feelings could result from any number of intellectual and character flaws, and most importantly, they can go fuck themselves. In that sense, advocates of social justice bullshit don't create. They just react to what other people create. They do very little work themselves, and what they do manage to make is little more than a trite ideological copy pasta, a talentless paint-by-numbers designed by committee and passed from idiot to idiot who aspires to nothing more than daubing the approved paint and more or less staying within the lines. And watching that paint dry means that they tend to attack when you're half asleep anyway, bored to tears by the sameness of what they do day after day. Social justice tactics are, perhaps by intent, but more likely a happy accident for them, just like landmines buried in a poppy field designed to blow anyone with a bit of purpose in their step sky high while ignoring the tread of some SJW lightweight. Now, who knows who dropped a dime on me and for what? For all I know, it could be this liar, this con artist, this big fat ass, this lackey, or this scumbag, and or any of their microcephalic minions. About the time my Twitter was suspended, I had my first DMCA takedown notice from YouTube. The Honey Badger Brigade treated the dumbest BuzzFeed video ever, which is the lowest bar imaginable, to 100% protected fair use. You see, BuzzFeed thought it would be all cool and edgy and shit to have various members of their staff in different stages on the continuum of having the cholesterol level of hot buttered popcorn try to recreate the action poses of comic books using the static posing skill of unathletic lumps in leotards, which is, of course, impossible. But then again, so would be trying to stand fucking still and recreate a pose of a human being, an actual human being in motion. Now, the Honey Badgers treated this exercise in demonstrating something or other about bodies or comics or 3 Cosmo lunches at BuzzFeed to the sort of contempt it deserved. BuzzFeed, for their part, apparently found copyright Jesus and became interested in the rights of content creators when it was them creating content and flagged the fuck out of the video. And then they flagged the fuck out of my mirror. And all this comes on the heels of this buffet for squirrels and known self-harasser putting out yet another call for her flying monkeys, not one of whom is instrument-rated, to flag the living hell out of anything that moves. Of course, it would come as a total shock if such a well-intentioned and disciplined campaign spilled into social media in general. Admittedly, after seeing the latest Everything is Harassment campaign, I began hitting the woo pretty hard with the sort of expertly crafted tweets you would get if, say, the Amish used Twitter and wrote juvenile shitposts. Could this have been the tweet that did it? Or this one? Or could it be this one that broke the camel toe's back? Now, I've become more than a little irked at seeing Woo's asymmetrical Nicolas Cage fright mask attached to yet another series of gamers suck stories that treat Woo as if shit. In this case, the preferred pronouns for any SJW are she, he, it, respectfully abbreviated as shit. Please use the preferred pronouns. Thank you. Was an expert in anything except shameless self-promotion, taking credit for other people's work, and overall just being a failure. So when Woo presents shit self as official spokestroll for all women everywhere, a little mockery of someone who's gone out of their way to be a public figure without the talent to back it up should not only be allowed, but is positively obligatory. especially since, according to my back-of-the-envelope calculations here, Wu has only 5 years of womanhood under her cheap plastic Forever 21 belt, and were it not for her elective surgery vagina, would be, in trying to speak for women, guilty of the most massive spasm of mansplaining since that lost episode of Leave It to Beaver where Timothy Leary's Special Reserve acid found its way into Ward Cleaver's scotch. However, if Wu is behind this suspension, and remember, I have no reason to believe so except it's the funniest of all possibilities, Shit's motivation is entirely jealousy, being that my hair is longer, fuller, and better conditioned, and even assuming I'm semi-gruesome, I'm still prettier than whatever the fuck that is. By now, we all know how this works. When a strategically offended social justice warrior or perpetually dissatisfied third-wave feminist or member of some other group of animals that is more equal than others misrepresents or just, as is their way, makes shit up, it's for that narrow band of the greater good that coincides with their personal self-interest, either financially or by boosting their position in the social justice clown hierarchy. But when a non-SJW, racist, misogynistic, whatever phobic by definition, pushes back, that's abuse and harassment, the approved catch-all of the incurious IT drones and panderers running Twitter, trotted out whenever some nobody, such as myself, has some fun at the expense of someone who attention whores tirelessly to become a public figure, but feels exempt from all the consequences of making a public spectacle of their own stupidity, intolerance, and grim, highly selective, and hypocritical puritanism. Now, I haven't spent much time making videos in the past. Well, okay, you got me there. I've spent no time at all making videos in the past few months. The personal and professional reasons for this I'll detail in a video tentatively titled Time and the Art of Complete Bullshit. But suffice to say, when you work full-time, get tasked with a bunch of stuff with a learning curve, bike 10 miles a day and work at an hour, unless you have the endurance I've lost and the time management skills I lack, something has to give. However, perhaps the following points will go a ways towards explaining where I am and where I have to go. Point 1. I am probably done on Twitter. Now, considering it took me more than a month to get unsuspended the last time I was targeted by women, action, and the media, and this time I had both my primary and backup accounts suspended, I have every reason to believe I'm done on Twitter and will join the Cool Kids Club with Janet Judgy Bitch Bloomfield and others who had their Twitter accounts terminated on a pretext. Just as well, too, although shitposting on Twitter is fun, at the end of the day it's just Twitter, where common sense and attention spans go to die. The only real justification for Twitter is as a gateway to more worthwhile mediums such as forums, link aggregate sites, and videos. Point 2. YouTube isn't far behind. Interesting thing is that SJWs really don't do much of anything aside from comparing neurosis and wallowing in misery, which leaves them an enormous amount of time to police everyone else's thought, word, and deed. And anyone who has dealt with them knows that, as sucking black holes, they can never be satiated, not even by blood. No matter how much power lazy panderers hand over to them, it's not enough. They can't call out enough people, project their paranoia on enough people, get enough people shamed, suspended, or fired to fill the void where their internal life should be. But that doesn't mean that the merest pinprick can't set off an SJW feeding frenzy. And so it wouldn't surprise me, what with the ongoing moral panic over harassment that isn't really harassment and is for the most part simply disagreement, it wouldn't surprise me if my catalog of videos suddenly became inappropriate content. Remember, it doesn't have to be true. Just the right SJWs or the right number of their brain-dead followers have to claim it is. And the more misinformed and gutless the provider they complain to, the more their vague and selectively enforced policies favors the dishonest social justice warrior. There simply isn't a subject or venue that is immune from a coordinated attack should social justice types not get their way. Remember the SJWs trying to infest online communities for heavy metal the way they did atheism, skepticism, and gaming? No matter how many times they're repelled by headbangers, they're at it again. They literally have nothing better to do. Point 3. Time to do things differently. As I said, I'll deal with this in detail later, but what I managed to do was get myself into a time management cul-de-sac, what with the demands of being gainfully employed in a way that an SJW would never understand, being more or less fit and active in a way an SJW would never understand, and trying to do things bigger and better in a way that an SJW, as you might guess, would never understand. Problems that don't plague SJWs because their job, especially if it involves living off daddy's dime or being an online grifter, isn't particularly demanding. Their lives seem to be exercises in low-impact complaining and thinking up 6 good excuses before breakfast for their serial failures, and when they do put their noses to what passes for their grindstone, nothing is easier than spewing repetitive, unsourced horseshit that has little, if any, bearing on reality. Me, I just have to scale back and streamline things a bit, stick to shorter exposition rather than trying to explain it all at once, and give up on my obsession that the only worthwhile writing is rewriting, and generally embrace the idea that most shit spun off the top of my head on a bad day is 70% better than the all-parrot chorus repeating the SJW mantra of the day. Point 4. If you don't have a backup, you're fucked. The more social media is concentrated into outfits like Twitter and YouTube that are easily gamed by bogus copyright claims and the never-ending reality-defying lies of social justice warriors, the easier it will be to tumble down the rabbit hole of their manufactured outrage. Ultimately, SJWs are doomed because history shows that circus acts like the House Un-American Activities Committee, satanic ritual abuse, and Macintosh's brain can't sustain the outward spewing of bullshit necessary to prevent them from collapsing in on themselves. However, that doesn't mean in their death throes they might not go full-on SJW bullshit red giant. And as we know, being Twitter or YouTube means never having to say you're sorry. The consequences and suspensions and bans made in the temporary insanity of SJW pandering can persist forever. And, well, fuck that. Besides, if Twitter, for instance, gave me the opportunity to confess my sins, delete the offending tweets, assuming there's something concrete behind my suspension, and promise to never ever do it, whatever it is again, they can still go fuck themselves. Whatever it is I did, I'm proud of it. Given half a chance to do it again, I would do it double life-sized and twice as ugly. Anyway, there's got to be a plan B, although I'm not quite sure what form that will take now. Perhaps returning to platforms that don't require tiptoeing through the invisible minefield, like short blogging on my old provider who laughed at calls for censorship, and backing up my videos on a paid service that would give the provider a financial incentive not to delete my content. That is, without the irritating monetization plan of an outfit like YouTube, which I have avoided like the Black Death with a side of herpes. Point 5. If everyone's going to be a whore, you've got to be a better whore. Social justice warriors, third-wave intersectional feminists, identity politics special pleaders, and all manner of people infected with those forms of politicized postmodernism have no endgame. Once you claim there is no such thing as objective reality, that everything is subjective, but your subjectivity has protected status, and that fluffing your pillows and making sure you're comfy is everyone else's job, there's simply no state of being at which you would be satisfied. And as these sort of con artists and parasites have a marked financial stake in maintaining their baseline dissatisfaction, for some of them, either bullshit is their business or they aspire to being a new hire in a wave of corporate diversity officers paid a wage for fucking around on Twitter all day. Their problem is they have nothing worth saying, which is why they turn to the threat narrative to justify their ideology, as if the 0.01% of comments by edgelord 12-year-olds means they're not only doing the right thing, but are being all brave doing it. Except, and I've asked this in many places, is there ever been a case where someone tweeted, "I'm going to rape and kill you," and then the next day had his mom drive him to the person he tweeted at in his Spider-Man BVDs to make good on his threat? Has it ever happened? Ever? First, someone calling you an asshole doesn't make you an asshole, but on the other hand, someone calling you an asshole doesn't mean you're not an asshole. And if you're standing firm against a threat that doesn't actually exist, that doesn't make you brave. That makes you able to pose for the cameras. In fact, all the demonstrable threats, harassment, doxing, even bomb threats have not been directed at social justice warriors and their fellow travelers. They've come from them. In fact, you can take the social justice con artist's obsession with such things as simply their projecting their own tactics on their enemies. And the real goal isn't justice or tolerance. It's a form of headhunting, an attempt to decapitate any community notable enough for them to set their sights on and batter it down to the level of mediocrity that is the social justice warrior's comfort zone. And for that, not only do they have the lazy pandering press and the lazy pandering Twitter, they have lazy panderers willing to throw money at them. Serial abuser and domestic violence arrestee Karen Stolznow got $60,000 to support her crusade to demonstrate that nobody gets to dump her, least of all the spineless Ben Radford. Anita Sarkeesian pulled in almost $500,000 to do something or other against the patriarchy that resulted in a couple of YouTube videos that could have been made for the price of a pizza and a couple of six-packs. Zoe Quinn, who has never done a fucking thing in her life except make an embarrassingly inept twine-built text-based game and then hosebag for good press, gets $3 1/3 grand a month merely for existing. Mostly I've tried to avoid the whorishness of the SJW camp, who have all the nuance of a toothless crackhead giving behind-the-dumpster blowjobs for loose change. I've turned down people who wanted to throw a C-note or two my way to do a video when I wasn't feeling it. And when I have whored myself, and I have whored myself, I consider it being a hooker with a heart of gold helping worthy causes and plumping up their war chests when they were under attack and needed to flex some legal muscle. However, there comes a time when one has to take steps to keep from going under when being attacked by overfunded and ethically bankrupt SJWs who are trying to put honesty, conscience, and goddammit fun out of people's reach. And in that case, one's cause has to be eventually oneself. Having my Twitter suspended, no doubt forever, isn't a hit at my video production, but it is a major setback in promoting and distributing them by word of mouth on social media. Now, if you want to drop me a line or tell me what PZ Myers has been up to lately, you can just write mykeru@gmail.com. And so, after much hemming and hawing, I've got my Patreon up and running and will be accepting your hard-won dollars. And fuck it, if Zoe Quinn can pull in several $1,000s a month for breathing our oxygen and queefing out whatever the fuck it is she told the UN she does, I could make $1 per video of calculated outrage. Especially if I have to move to paid platforms that will be harder for SJWs and corporate whores to DMCA and complain, as well as supporting some other platforms from which I can tell them to go fuck themselves. Because, let's face it, as I said, YouTube is next. Happily, there's a new year coming wherein I can shrug off the infectious SJW ennui and plan anew. When I was still on Twitter, I very often tweeted articles from Breitbart, joking that when the right-wing rag is the voice of reason, we are all well and truly fucked. But not really. Few people complained and even less assumed I was a right-winger myself. That's because, by now, most people have realized that this isn't a fight of left versus right, and the old conservative versus liberal categories have broken down. This is a fight between libertarians, myself being on the libertarian left, and the soulless, no-fun, ruthless, scalp-collecting authoritarians represented by social justice clowns, third-wave intersectional fashionista feminists, purveyors of racism in the guise of identity politics, and all manner of pink-goateed hipster douchebags. Thank you for your well wishes, your support, and see you next year.